What if solitude wasn't something to escape, but something sacred to return to? I want you to picture this, a moment when the world feels too loud, too fast, too demanding. Now imagine stepping away, not out of weakness, but out of strength. There are people who find shelter in their own company, not because they fear the world, but because they've learned to hear themselves more clearly in silence. To them, being alone isn't empty, it's restorative. It's where energy returns, clarity rises, and the heart remembers what matters. This isn't about isolation, it's about reconnection. And today, I want to show you what makes these souls so different, starting with a trait that shapes every true bond they form: loyalty. When someone finds comfort in their own company, they don't hand out their trust like candy. They don't build relationships out of boredom or settle for surface-level connections just to pass the time. For them, loyalty isn't a word, it's a way of being. They choose who enters their life with care, not caution. Their friendships are rooted in something deeper than convenience, truth. And when they give you space in their world, it means something. They're not looking for popularity. They're looking for presence. They value the kind of bond that doesn't need constant reassurance, the kind built on mutual respect, not mutual benefit. If you've earned their trust, you'll find something rare. Someone who's steady. Someone who listens when no one else is. Someone who shows up without needing to be asked. But here's the part many miss. When that trust is broken, when they sense dishonesty or manipulation, they don't argue. They step back, quietly, permanently, because for them, betrayal isn't just a disappointment. It's a violation of something sacred. And they know that true connection can't exist without emotional safety. You won't find them gossiping, playing games, or making empty promises. They'd rather say less and mean it than say more and perform. Their loyalty is reflected not just in what they say, but in what they refuse to become. They're the type who will defend you in a room full of silence, who will tell you the hard truth because they respect you too much to lie. And yes, this can make them seem distant, maybe even cold. But if you've ever been loved or supported by someone like this, you know it's not coldness. It's depth, integrity, it's presence without performance. And the root of all that isn't just their loyalty to others, it's the loyalty they've learned to give themselves. Which leads us to something just as rare in today's world: self-trust. There's something undeniably steady about people who feel at home in their own presence. You can sense it, not in how loudly they speak, but in how little they need to prove. They don't chase validation. They don't crave applause. They carry themselves with a kind of quiet certainty that doesn't beg to be noticed. That's not arrogance, that's self-trust. They've spent enough time with themselves to know who they are, what they value, where they're headed, and what they refuse to tolerate. They don't outsource their worth to someone else's approval. They've learned to sit with doubt, wrestle with fear, and still choose their own voice over the noise. And that's rare. Because let's be honest, most people are terrified of being alone with their thoughts. But these individuals lean in, they listen. They don't run from the quiet because that's where their clarity lives. You won't see them constantly checking their phones for reassurance. They don't need to be seen to feel real. They're already anchored by experience, by reflection, by a deep inner compass that doesn't shift every time the crowd changes direction. This doesn't mean they're closed off or emotionally distant. In fact, it's the opposite. Because they trust themselves, they can show up more fully for others. They set boundaries without guilt. They make decisions without second-guessing every step. And they don't collapse under pressure to be liked. They'd rather be aligned. It might come off as stoic, but look closer. What you're really seeing is emotional independence. One built through time, solitude, and a willingness to face what's inside. They're not trying to escape themselves. They've made peace with who they are, and that peace gives them strength most people never find. So when they sit in silence, it's not emptiness, it's restoration, it's presence, it's power. And that leads us right into what makes their alone time so different from loneliness. Because for them, solitude isn't something to endure. It's something sacred. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you sat alone and felt at peace? For many, being alone stirs discomfort. They reach for noise, distractions, someone, anyone to fill the quiet. But for those who've made peace with solitude, that same silence is a source of strength. They don't avoid being alone. They choose it, not out of isolation, but because something within them flourishes when no one's watching. It's in these undisturbed moments that their mind softens, their breath deepens, and their spirit resets. While the world hurries forward, they pause, not to escape, but to remember. They aren't dependent on constant plans or social buzz to feel alive. Instead, they create intentional space for thinking, reflecting, healing. A slow morning, a quiet evening walk, a book that doesn't demand anything. This isn't loneliness, it's liberation. And here's the beautiful truth. Time spent alone doesn't disconnect them. It recenters them. It allows them to notice what others miss. To feel their emotions fully, not numb them. To recharge, not retreat. This doesn't mean they avoid people. In fact, they often form deeper, more meaningful relationships because they enter them by choice, not need. They don't fear silence in conversation or absence in company. They understand that being alone doesn't mean being unloved. It means being aligned. Solitude also sharpens their sense of self. They know what restores them, what drains them, and what they need to stay whole. That level of self-awareness is a kind of quiet superpower, because when you know how to be alone, you're never at the mercy of someone else's presence to feel complete. This gentle strength shows up in the way they live. Less rush, more intention, less noise, more meaning. And maybe that's the real difference. While others avoid stillness, they step into it. And in doing so, they discover something most people overlook. That solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's the gateway to it. Just because someone enjoys solitude doesn't mean they live inside a shell. Quite the opposite. Many of them are deeply curious, constantly learning, quietly expanding. But here's what sets them apart. They don't rush toward the new just to impress others. They don't follow trends for fear of being left behind. Their growth is self-guided, not spotlight-driven. While others document every step of their journey for likes or approval, these individuals are often exploring quietly behind the scenes, reading something profound, trying a new hobby, diving into a passion project no one even knows about. They're not seeking attention, they're seeking depth, and that changes everything. They welcome change, but only when it feels aligned. They don't say yes to every opportunity. They pause, reflect, ask, does this truly add to my life? And if the answer is no, they let it go without guilt. That kind of discernment isn't resistance, it's wisdom. It's the ability to know that not every door needs to be opened, not every road needs to be walked. They move at their own pace, slow when it's needed, bold when it's right. And because they're not constantly reacting to outside pressure, they experience new things more deeply. They learn with intention. They stay curious not because they're trying to become someone else, but because they're becoming more of who they already are. You'll often find them drawn to philosophy, psychology, nature, art. They're not afraid to dive deep into things most people skim. They don't just try something new. They live with it, wrestle with it, allow it to shape them. Even their creativity tends to be richer because it's born in silence, not noise. In solitude, imagination has room to stretch. So no, they're not rigid. They're rooted, they're not closed off. They're simply open, on their own terms. And this gentle self-direction spills into every area of their life, including how they protect their most precious resource, time. If you want to understand someone who thrives in solitude, look at how they treat time. They don't waste it. They honor it, almost like it's a sacred currency. While many rush through the day, bouncing from distraction to obligation, they move with a kind of presence that feels rare. They don't fill their calendar just to feel busy. They fill their life with meaning. To them, time isn't something to kill. it's something to protect. And that changes how they engage with everything. They're intentional about what they say yes to. They're not afraid to say no, not out of avoidance, but because they know that every yes is a piece of their energy. They measure their commitments not by how impressive they sound, but by how aligned they feel. And that applies to people too. They don't keep connections just because of history. They don't entertain conversations that drain them. They prefer one meaningful exchange over 10 shallow ones. Because time with the wrong energy costs more than it seems. This is why you'll rarely find them lingering in gossip, small talk, or pointless obligations. They'd rather spend an hour walking in silence than stuck in a room where they can't breathe. That choice isn't cold, it's clarity. They also plan their solitude the same way others plan vacations. They carve out space to rest, reflect, create. They don't just get through the day, they make room inside it. Room to read, write, think, breathe. Even their productivity feels different. They're not hustling to keep up. They're simplifying to go deeper, because they've learned something most people haven't. Just because the world moves fast doesn't mean you have to, and perhaps that's the secret. They're not slow because they're lost. They're slow because they're choosing what matters. And when you treat time with that kind of reverence, you start treating your space that way too. There's a kind of peace that comes from having space that's fully your own. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. For those who value solitude, personal space isn't optional, it's sacred. It's the container where their soul exhales. They don't isolate themselves out of fear. They carve out space to stay grounded. It's how they protect the part of themselves that the world can't always understand. You won't see them oversharing or entertaining endless small talk, not because they're hiding something, but because they've learned that not everything deserves exposure. Some thoughts are meant to stay close to the chest. Some emotions are meant to be processed in silence, not scattered across conversations. They set boundaries quietly but firmly, not to push people away, but to protect the depth they've fought to build within. They know that without boundaries, their inner world gets noisy, scattered, drained. That's why they're cautious with who gets access. They don't open up easily, not out of distrust, but discernment, because they know the cost of inviting the wrong energy into sacred places. Their home, whether physical or emotional, is a sanctuary. They keep it uncluttered, intentional, soothing. It's not about aesthetic, it's about emotional clarity. You'll often find they cherish routines others overlook. A quiet corner, a clean desk, a closed door. These are not signs of disconnection. They are anchors. This isn't about being antisocial. It's about being deeply self-aware. They can be warm, present, even charismatic, but only when they've had time to return to themselves. They don't apologize for needing space, because they've realized that space is not distance, it's preservation. And when that space is respected, they can show up more authentically than ever. Their boundaries aren't walls, they're doorways, with locks that click open only when it's safe to be fully seen. And now, as we begin to close this journey, there's one final truth worth holding on to. Not everyone will understand the way you move, the way you protect your time, the way you crave silence, the way you choose depth over noise. But those who do, those who see you, know it's not distance. It's wisdom. Your solitude doesn't make you strange. It makes you whole. In a world chasing constant connection, you've built something rare. A quiet, steady relationship with yourself. Your loyalty, your boundaries, your stillness. These aren't signs of absence. They are signs of presence, of inner alignment. So, if this spoke to you, honor it, share it. Let someone else feel seen too, because in a world of surface, depth is a revolution, and maybe, just maybe, that revolution begins with you.